I'm going straight to the top. Whoa.
Ken Lay saw in Jeff Skilling the guy who had the answer to what the future of the natural gas business was supposed to be. Ken Lay is also a guy who considers himself a visionary, and he liked other people he thought of as visionaries. He liked people with big ideas, and Jeff Skilling was a person with the biggest ideas of all.
Jeff Skilling's biggest single idea was to find a new way to deliver energy. Rather than be bound by the physical flow of the pipeline, Enron would become a kind of stock market for natural gas. It was a magical new idea. Transform energy into financial instruments that could be traded like stocks and bonds.
So that was the one good idea. In 1992, using that good idea, we became the largest buyer and seller of natural gas in North America.
Jeff was like the prophet. He came in and said, there's a whole new world out there. Forget about this pipeline stuff, the state pipeline in the ground and gas in and gas out. We can recreate this entire industry.
An attorney from Vinson & Elkins, Amanda Martin was one of the first executives hired by Jeff Skilling and became part of his inner circle.
The excitement was palpable. You cannot imagine how proud we all were to be there. And then, of course, we had a leader who imbued us with a sense of confidence that if we were smart, anything could be accomplished. And then the bottom line, we began to make money. And that in and of itself was a reaffirmation that this could be big.
Skilling saw the opportunity to build an industry new and to start a business from scratch, but he had one specific condition that had to be met before he'd join Enron, and it was that he'd be allowed to use a certain kind of accounting known as mark-to-market. Arthur Andersen signed off and the SEC approved it.
I remember walking in and going, what's going on? And Causey and everybody, everyone was so excited, and in came the champagne, and we'd got mark-to-market accounting treatment. And I often think about how clear my memory was about that event. And that was the beginning of a major cog in the downfall, ultimately, of Enron.
Mark-to-market accounting allowed Enron to book potential future profits on the very day a deal was signed. No matter how little cash actually came in the door, to the outside world, Enron's profits could be whatever Enron said they were.
Very subjective. And it left it open to manipulation.
And they were saying that we're going to sell power out of this power plant in 10 years for X dollars per kilowatt. And there was no way anybody could prove that they could do it.
Well,
hey,
good
Rich,
morning.
how are you?
Finally,
good
great,
to see you.
Jeff.
Yeah.
Good
Morning,
to see
Rich.
Todd. Sit down.
We've been working hard on this, and we've really pulled out all the stops. Look what we got. Origination. We did $20 million last year. We think we can do $120 million this year. Trading. We did $10 million last year. We think we can do 64 this year. This is the key. We're going to move from mark-to-market accounting to something I call HFV, hypothetical future value accounting.
Whoa!
If we do that, we can add a gazillion dollars to the bottom line.
Whoa, Jeff! All right, that sounds fantastic. Oh, Jeff, thank you. That's just superb performance. And you're going to go far, my boy. Probably president of the company one day.
You think so?
I think.
He really believed that the idea was everything, and that when you came up with an idea, you should be able to book the profits from that idea right away. Because otherwise, some lesser man was taking the profits from the idea that some greater man had come up with in the past.
When Jeff Skilling applied to Harvard Business School, the professor asked him if he was smart. He replied, "I'm fucking smart." One of his favorite books was The Selfish Gene, about the ways human nature is steered by greed and competition in the service of passing on our genes. At Enron, Skilling wanted to set free the basic instincts of survival of the fittest.
Jeff had a very Darwinian view of how the world worked. He was famous for saying once in Enron's early years that money was the only thing that motivated people.
Skilling's notion of how the world should work really trickled down and affected everything about how Enron did business.
He instituted a system known as the PRC, or Performance Review Committee. It required that people be graded from a 1 to a 5, and roughly 10% of people had to be a 5, and those people were supposed to be fired. Hence, this came to be known as rank and yank.
I personally am convinced that the PRC process is the most important process that we conduct as a company.
I've never heard of a company yet that would be successful terminating 15% of their people every year just to satisfy the fact that the other employees had to vote on them.
And so when you're being evaluated by that group, you are getting direct communication from Ken and me about what the objectives of the company are and how you fit with those objectives.
It was a brutal process. The ability for a 25-year-old to go in and to be reviewed and to be superior, and as a consequence, get a $5 million bonus. I don't think that's repeated in many places in corporate America.
Our culture is a tough culture. It is a very aggressive culture.
8 million on new deals.
At Enron, no one was more aggressive than the traders.
You're not going to make 17 million.
If I'm on the way to my boss's office to argue about my compensation, and if I step on somebody's throat on the way, that doubles it, well, I'll stomp on the guy's throat. You know, that's how people work.
Is that your 4.5 mil?
On the trading side, we got to be the biggest, baddest house in town. And by necessity, if you wanted to be in the market, you had to deal with Enron.
Try to reconcile your big numbers here.
Enron's traders were like the super powerful high school clique that even the principal doesn't dare to rein in. They had become the major engine of at least reported profits at the company. They took Jeff Skilling and Ken Lay's belief in free markets and turned it into an ideology.
But they pitch it almost as a new economic religion.
Enron Online will change the markets for many, many commodities. It is creating an open, transparent marketplace that replaces the dark, blind system that existed. It is real simple. You turn on your computer, and it's right there. That's our vision. We're trying to change the world.
I think Jeff Skilling had a desperate need to believe that Enron was a success. I think he identified with Enron. He proclaimed at one point, "I am Enron."
The other thing about people at Enron is a lot of them were former nerds, and including Jeff Skilling.
He had been paunchy, he had big glasses, he losing his hair, and Jeff Skilling one day kind of woke up and decided to change himself. And he started working out, lost a lot of weight, but he really did remake himself through sheer will and force of personality.
When Jeff got LASIK on his eyes, everybody at Enron got LASIK, so nobody was wearing glasses.
I think Jeff Skilling is really a tragic figure in a classic sense of the word. He's a guy that people describe as incandescently brilliant, but he's also a guy who is radically different than he at times portrays himself. He's portrayed himself as somebody who has very tightly monitored risk. In reality, he's a gambler. He gambled away huge sums of money before he was 20 years old by making wild bets on the market.
So Jeff Skilling, risk was glamorous. He was a huge risk taker. He actually talked about wanting to go on trips that were so perilous that someone could actually die. This manifests itself in trips that Jeff Skilling led for a small group of friends and customers.
A core cadre of Enron guys used to go on these wild adventures. Andy Fasta would go, Ken Rice would go.
The trips were legend. You know, we can sit and think about what strange insecurities they were trying to overcome, but it made them feel good as men.
And they took a particularly memorable trip to the Baja, 1,200 miles in very rugged terrain in Mexico. This is a trip where people crash bikes. Ken Rice was on the trip and he busted a lip and required a bunch of stitches. People broke bones. One guy flipped a Jeep and almost got killed. Those sorts of stories at Enron became legend, and it fed the whole macho culture of the place.
Jeff Skilling had a way of describing people that he liked. He said, I like guys with spikes. He liked somebody with something extreme about them.
Andy Fastow was Enron's chief financial officer. His job was to cover up the fact that Enron was becoming a financial fantasy land.
Enron essentially was losing money on a cash basis year after year, and yet it was reporting profits. So it was defying the laws of financial gravity, and the way it was doing it was with something called structured finance. And the maestro of all that at Enron was Andy Fastow.
Andy was very young. He was hired by Jeff Skilling probably before he was even 30, and he idolized Jeff Skilling, and he certainly wanted to please the boss.
To please the boss, Fastow had to figure out a way to keep the stock price up by hiding the fact that Enron was $30 billion in debt.
People pressured by the need to keep the stock price up begin to cheat a little bit, but then the next quarter comes along and you have to cheat a little more to do the new cheating to make up for the old cheating. And before long, you've created a momentum that now you can't stop.
Fastow created hundreds of special companies to perform a magic trick, prop up Enron's stock by making its debt disappear. To outside investors, it looked like cash was coming in the door. In fact, Enron was just stashing its debt in Fastow's companies where investors couldn't see it.
It was black magic. It really was. You were pulling some rabbits out of a hat.
Something to make us all happy.
They could bury debt, they could bury losses.
Many of the companies had exotic names: Jedi, Chuko, Raptors. LJM was Fastow's most ambitious creation. It would work magic for Enron, and it would allow Fastow to conjure $45 million for himself.
Instead of $450 million in equity, we only invested.
Andy, in many ways, was someone we all knew didn't have a strong moral compass. It's almost like Jeff Skilling said, okay, we're hitting some troubled times. Let's set up Andy so we can fill the earnings holes when we need to, knowing that Andy would probably skim a little bit off each transaction for himself. There's a body heat kind of angle to this, you know, where Skilling is Kathleen Turner and Andy is William Hurt. You know, in the end, he got suckered into helping all the executives meet their earnings.
What I wish, in retrospect, I wish I'd never heard of LJM.
Is it your contention that you knew of it and it was appropriate?
Arthur Anderson and our lawyers had taken a very hard look at this structure and they believed it was appropriate.
But if the theory is that Fastow went rogue somewhere deep in the jungles of Enron and was the sole agent of the apocalypse, I just don't buy it.
Skilling, Lay, and the Enron board had signed off on Fastow's LJM funds. They saw the benefits of letting Fastow do deals with himself.
It is in Enron's best interest because Enron needs the capital, number one.
In a secret videotape that surfaced after the bankruptcy, Fastow can be seen selling LJM to a group of Merrill Lynch bankers. He pitches them on the benefits of investing in a fund that only buys assets from Enron.
Remember, I'm not selling the assets to myself. They own the assets, they're selling them to LJM too.
Fastow knew what kind of deal he was offering as Enron's CFO. He could guarantee profits for LJM.
Yeah, I think this is an extraordinary opportunity.
He has a sort of Cheshire cat grin on his face as he talks about all the ways that the fund is going to profit. And he talks about the informational advantages that he's going to have in his dual role as Enron's CFO and as the head of these funds.
Special arrangement. There is never any question that I will be on both sides of the transaction. I will always be on the LJM side of the transaction.
He was general partner of LJM while at the same time being CFO of Enron. Now that's a whole nother ball of wax when you want to talk about that conflict of interest, because no human being should be put in a situation where every single transaction they decide whether they're looking after Enron's best interests or their limited partners, because this LJM partnership existed solely to do business with Enron.
As you would expect, Andy, as Chief Financial Officer of Enron, is heavily banked, so to speak. And as a result, there are 5 or 6 of the name brand banks who have stepped up and said they'll commit to this.
Commit they did, and why not? Fastow was letting them gamble with Enron's chips.
Fastow was using Enron stock as collateral for a lot of these things. They were betting their own company on the transactions.
With a prospect of returns that would exceed 2,000%, 96 individual bankers invested in LJM, and America's major banks put up as much as $25 million each.
It's sort of a who's who of Wall Street. J.P. Morgan Chase, CS First Boston, Citibank, Merrill Lynch, Deutsche Bank. These are some of the premier investment banks in the world.
It's hard for us to poke holes in this good that
It's just amazing how skilled Enron and Andy Fastow were at working Wall Street, playing on Wall Street's greed in order to get money out of them.
To quote Lenin, they were the investment bankers' useful idiots.
Over the year 2001, Skilling became increasingly despondent. He'd always been a moody guy, but people who knew him said he became just increasingly volatile, show up for work unshaven, looking blurry-eyed. And I think it was the battle of holding these two totally disjointed thoughts in his mind at the same time. One is Enron, a superstar company, and the other of feeling like it was all crumbling away.
The first cracks in Skilling's public image appeared in a conference call with analysts in April 2001.
And then Jeff Skilling took questions. And about midway through the session, there was a questioner who was sort of aggressively wondering out loud why it was that Enron, as a financial services company, in effect, could not release a balance sheet with its earnings statement like most financial institutions do.
You're the only financial institution that can't produce a balance sheet or a cash flow statement with their earnings.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Asshole.
And then quite audibly, you could hear Skilling say, asshole.
And then he said, asshole.
As I understand, you call him an asshole.
And this just caused unbelievable amounts of consternation all across Wall Street because people thought a Fortune 500 CEO losing it like this, publicly calling an investor an asshole.
If I could go back and redo things, I would not now have used the term that I used.
Mark Palmer, Enron's chief PR guy, even ran a note up to Skilling telling him to apologize, and he just took the piece of paper and tucked it under the pile of papers on his desk. And afterwards, Enron's traders, who had erupted in cheers when Skilling called this guy an asshole, made him a sign. There was a play off Enron's motto, Ask Why, and the sign said, Ask Why, asshole.
My personal feeling was that Jeff looked at the numbers, and he knew that we were in a massive hole. It was the only time, but I saw him truly, truly worried about keeping the stock price up. And he just kept saying to me, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do.
The broadband business was in complete meltdown. And there were all sorts of other problems that Jeff Skilling, as the company's chief operating officer, was wrestling with. In the middle of all of this, Ken Lay walks into Jeff Skilling's office holding up fabric swatches for the new G5 $45 million corporate jet he wanted to buy. And he said to Jeff, asked him a very important question, which of these cabin configurations do you like best, Jeff?
While Ken Lay was stressing over the corporate jet, EES was headed for a crash landing. Facing $500 million in losses, Lou Pye's top lieutenant, Tom White, wondered how EES could show a profit by the end of the quarter.
One of the things that was always a strange occurrence at Enron was for weeks before a quarterly report, we would be under the impression that we weren't going to make our numbers. But then somehow miraculously, we always made the numbers and then some. But then a question was asked to Tom White, how is it that we made the numbers? And his answer was one word, California.
California, here we come.
The first clues to Enron's new strategy hit California with a jolt.
California.
It started at noon, rolling across the state. Sacramento, San Francisco, Beverly Hills, Long Beach, San Diego.
26,000 miles of California power lines, enough to circle the earth. But for the second day in a row, not enough electricity for America's largest state and the world's sixth largest economy.
The first thing we heard about this energy crisis is, well, our lights are going to go off in the middle of winter when we're using half the electricity we normally use during the summer.
The Bay Area got hit by not one, but two rolling blackouts today.
We only need 28,000 to 30,000 megawatts in December. We have an installed capacity in California at the time of 45,000 megawatts. Plenty of power to meet our electric demand. Of course, we had blackouts in December.
The people who control California's power grid say once again they're worried about having to black out the northern half of the state.
When the rolling blackouts started in California, there was definitely a lot of excitement in the air. It was something new. It was something that hadn't been encountered before. It was, how is this event going to affect the price of power?
Controlled rotating outages are being implemented.
I knew that there was illegality going on. I could feel it, I could smell it, I could sense it, and there was no other explanation. Because the numbers just didn't add up. We had enough power in California. It was never about lack of supply.
When I ran for governor in 1998, not one human being asked me about electricity. This thing kind of came out of the woods as far as I was concerned, and I was trying in the early days to learn what was happening, how we could fix the problem.
California was selected by Enron as the prime place to experiment with this new concept of deregulated electricity.
Reducing electricity costs is only one benefit from choice and competition.
In 1996, under pressure from energy companies, Governor Pete Wilson and the California legislature passed a bill allowing for the deregulation of electricity.
I wasn't in the legislature in 1996, but I can tell you that there isn't a legislator alive that can tell you with any sophistication how a deregulated electricity market ought to work. Not a one.
California's deregulated system was a bizarre compromise between legislators and free market advocates. The rules were complicated and hard to follow. Inside Enron, California's system was little more than a joke. And once in place, Enron made sure that the joke would be on California.
And I remember the conversation I'd had with Ken. At the end of it, he says, well, Dave, old buddy, let me just tell you, it doesn't matter really to us what kooky rules you Californians put in place. I got a bunch of really smart people down there who figure out how to make money anyhow.
One of the smartest guys at Enron was Tim Belden, who ran the West Coast trading desk.
Tim Belden was a fervent believer in the idea of free markets, and as such, he spent hours poring over the new rules for the deregulation of California's energy industry, looking for loopholes that Enron could exploit to make money.
He found plenty. After the bankruptcy, a confidential memo surfaced revealing the names of Belden's strategies to game the California market. Wheel out, get shorty, fat boy. Recently, audio tapes of the Enron traders were discovered.
What do you want to call this project? I have a catchy name for that. How about, something friendly like Death Star?
The tapes revealed Enron's contempt for any values except one, making money.
Hey, John, it's Tim. The regulatory is all in a big concern about is we're wheeling power out of California. He just steals money from California to the tune of $1 million. Can you rephrase that? Okay. He arbitrages the California market to the tune of $1 million or $2 a day.
An arbitrage opportunity has been defined to me as any opportunity to make abnormal profit. So an abnormal profit would be returns above and beyond the norm. I was told that a good trader is a creative trader, and a creative trader is a trader that can find arbitrage opportunities.
One of those opportunities was called Ricochet.
I'll see you guys. I'm taking mine to the desert.
In the midst of the energy shortages, Enron traders started to export power out of the state. When prices soared, they brought it back in.
So we fucking export like a motherfucker. We're getting rich. Trying to.
Traders would stay after a 12-hour shift and pour over maps of the Western energy grid. What are the permutations and combinations of ways to move power around the West? And I think that's something that Enron knew better than any other energy marketer in the country, period.
We know all of the California imports. We know all of the California load.
They're getting pretty spoiled on with this money.
You said you were getting a little scared. We're making a little too much, and I tend to agree with you.
These are two traders, Traders. This is what they say. What we did was overbook the transmission line we had the rights on and said to California utilities, if you want to use the line, pay us. By the time they agreed to meet our price, rolling blackouts had already hit California, and the price for electricity went through the roof. Did you have any knowledge that this was happening?
The only thing that I'm aware of, Senator, is there was a difference of opinion on the rules of the independent system operator. It was just set up. The rules weren't quite clear.
We have traders here from Enron who were saying they did something wrong, but you don't see anything wrong. I have one last question, and then I am done.
Traders soon discovered that by shutting down power plants, they could create artificial shortages that would push prices even higher.
Hey, this is David up at Enron. There's not much demand for power at all, and if we shut it down, could you bring it back up in 3 or 4 hours?
Oh, yeah.
Why don't you just go ahead and shut her down then, if that's okay?
Okay.
When you see 2 or 3 energy companies with 35% of their entire capacity down for maintenance on a single day, and as a result, the price of electricity skyrocketing 300 or 400%, and then a week later someone else does it up in Northern California, you begin to believe something's not smelling right here.
I want you guys to get a little creative.
Okay.
And come up with a reason to go down.
Like a forced outage type thing.
Right.
Those guys, at the flip of a switch, could just yank the California economy on its leash whenever they wanted to, and they did it, and they did it, and they did it, and they made so much money.
The heart of it is that an industry that went for 100 years, from the days of Edison, built the best electrical system in the world, sold the power at reasonable prices to consumers, and was very reliable, was all of a sudden turned into a casino.
These strategies made some money for Enron, but the real money was made by betting that the price of energy would go up. It did, and the West Coast traders made nearly $2 billion for Enron.
There's nothing wrong with the capitalism. There's nothing wrong with the free enterprise.
You can't treat electricity like you treat oranges. It's the lifeblood of the society. It can't be stored. You can't turn these people loose and let them just have a, quote, free market, because a free market is goddamn expensive to customers.
There would be ample supply available at the right fucking price.
Oh, sure there would.
It wasn't just Enron. Every company traded according to the rules that California put up there.
And we're the future of Enron. And we're fucking making $500 million for Enron. Can you believe that? Yeah. We'll definitely retire by we're 30.
We're talking about a commodity that normally trades in the $35 to $45 range. High prices are when it gets in the 50s or $1,000.
Prices aren't going to stay at $1,000 forever.
Weed out the weak people in the market now. Get rid of them, and you know what? The people who are strong stick around.
And the Enron traders never seem to step back and say, wait, is what we're doing ethical? Is it in our best long-term interests? Does it help us if we totally rape California? Does that advance our goals of nationwide deregulation? Instead, they sought out every loophole they could in order to profit from California's misery.
Temperatures in California are hitting higher than 100 degrees, fueling wildfires and fears that California's strained power grid could once again near collapse.
What's happening?
There's a fire under the core line. It's been derated from 45 to 2100.
Burn, baby, burn. That's a beautiful thing.
I was never comfortable on the trading floor at Enron. And if I had questions, I didn't ask them because I didn't want to know the answer. I didn't want confirmed what I suspected might be true. That what I was doing was in fact unseemly, or was at least unethical, if not worse.
Why did the traders do what they did? Was it their multi-million-dollar bonuses? Or had Enron found a way to exploit the darker side of human behavior?
In the early 60s, Stanley Milgram tried to figure out what characteristics there were of evil people. Was there an evil strain, or could normal people do really bad things? And so he set up this experiment. In the experiment, he had an actor playing an experimental subject and a real experimental subject.
You want to step right in here, learner, and have a seat there.
They went into this room, and he had an experimenter say, we're going to see if mild electric shocks will help people memorize lists.
Incorrect. You'll now get a shock of 75 volts.
Oh.
Soft hair. He kind of did some yelling in there.
The Milgram experiment has a lot to say about Enron because I think people lost their sense of morality. Like Milgram, once you accepted the idea that behaving inhumanely was okay, you could do anything. And the shocks increased with the number of mistakes that they made.
I can't stand the pain. Let me out of
Can't
here.
stand it. I'm not going to kill that man, eh?
The subject, the real subject, is begging the scientist-looking person to stop too, and the scientist only says, the experiment requires that you continue.
Please continue. Go on, please.
You accept all responsibility?
The responsibility is mine, correct. Please go on.
In a way, Skilling was almost like the guy telling those people below him that it was okay to up the power.
420 volts.
California's electric utilities may have to pull the plug on millions of customers.
It's the fucking coolest thing I've done in a long time. Yeah, holy fuck, yeah.
You gotta love the West.
435 volts.
During the height of Wednesday's blackout, fire crews had to free people trapped in elevators.
All those money you guys stole from those poor grandmothers of California? Yeah, Grandma Millie, man. But she's the one who couldn't figure out how to fucking vote on the butterfly ballot. Now she wants her fucking money back for the power you charged right up her ass.
450 volts.
Yeah, they're out there having fun in the warm California sun.
We must continue. Go on, please.
You're going to keep giving what, 450 volts every shot now?
That's correct. Continue.
It's kind of hard to say, well, we should be, we shouldn't do this even though it's allowed because, I mean, that's what we do. Right. The best that could happen is fucking an earthquake, let that thing float out to the Pacific and put them in fucking candles.
450 volts.
Milgram's discovery was disturbing. 50% of the subjects were willing to shock to the death, so long as the commands came from a seemingly legitimate source.
Yeah, they're out there having fun in the warm California sun.
Tonight I'm declaring a state of emergency in California to give the state the authority and the resources to keep the lights on in California.
The governor, who's been basically capitulating to the demands of the energy companies and the utility companies, needs to put his foot down. We wanted the governor to send in the state police or the National Guard to seize control of the power plants and put them back online.
And I thought we didn't have to take over every plant. We really only had to take over one, because then they would know he meant it.
I'm going to get the $9 billion back that Enron, Dynergy, and Reliant stole from us and get it back to you.
Despite what the people in California think, Enron's making money despite California, not because of California.
The year-long energy crisis would cost the state of California $30 billion.
The markets in California are the most regulated markets in North America today. And that's what's causing the problem. California is never deregulated. Enron buys stock today. Thank you very much. We are doing the right thing.
You're the good guys.
We are the good guys. We are on the side of angels. Oh, I can't help myself. You know what the difference is between the state of California and the Titanic? And this is being webcast. I know I'm going to regret this. But at least when the Titanic went down, the lights were on.
A top executive at one of America's biggest power companies received a raucous welcome in San Francisco tonight. Protesters heckled Enron CEO Jeffrey Skilling outside and inside during his appearance at the Commonwealth Club. One of the protesters even brought a blueberry pie and delivered it herself.
$132 million is what he made. We have a 50% hike
consumers in California are angry, and they should be. And if we had anything to do with this, then we are the stupidest people in the world.
I work for an organization. Every day people call saying they can't pay their electricity bill.
Millions of dollars off of California. Get out of here.
When the tidal wave of public anger started to grow, Ken Lay flew out here and convened a meeting of friends, and I guess he had a little more foresight than we did. He invited Arnold Schwarzenegger, brought them together at the Peninsula Hotel, and had a lunch meeting. The notes from that meeting really still have never surfaced, but we know that Ken Lay's pitch was, we've got to stay the course with deregulation, and the market will correct itself and everything will turn out fine. Now, at the time, we didn't understand really why he was so concerned, but now we do. The fact is that Ken Lay was out here because he understood that Enron itself was a house of cards. And if deregulation were to collapse, that Enron itself would collapse.
But Ken Lay had a trump card. In the midst of the energy crisis, his friend George W. Bush became president.
I, George Walker Bush, do solemnly swear.
I, George Walker Bush, do solemnly swear.
Ken Lay's going to be Secretary of Energy. Get out of here.
No.
How great would that be for all the players in the market?
It'd be great. I'd love to see Ken Lay be Secretary of Energy.
Ken Lay did have easy access to the Bush administration. On April 17th, he met with Vice President Dick Cheney and strongly argued against the imposition of federal price caps in California.
We're doing everything we can to help in California on a short-term basis. There's not a lot you can do. You can't manufacture kilowatts in the West Wing of the White House.
We're fighting with both hands tied behind our back. We no longer have the power to stop this. If the federal government doesn't help us, we're a dead duck.
At the time, Gray Davis was a likely candidate to run for president. Ken Lay knew that might give his friend George Bush a political reason to oppose California's appeals for federal price controls.
They know full well my administration's belief that price controls will not solve the problem.
His view was that the federal government really shouldn't get involved. This is California's problem. And I'm saying, with all due respect, Mr. President, our law said the federal government regulates this. So it is your problem. And you make appointments to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. So we had a polite but spirited discussion on that, and he says, I just can't be of help to you on that.
As I said from the very beginning of my administration, we'll work to help California in any way we can. And the best way we can is to be good citizens.
FERC, the federal agency which regulates energy in America, refused to intervene.
What was FERC doing, and why was it not taking action?
The chairman of FERC was Pat Wood, the man Ken Lay had personally recommended for the job.
It was easy for FERC to do Enron's bidding because all they had to do was do nothing, which they did very well.
Federal regulators are being pressured to act by the now Democratic-controlled Senate, where hearings...
A Democratic Senate forced FERC to impose regional price caps. That ended the energy crisis, but not the political one.
Did Ken Lay and George Bush have a political agenda to blame the energy crisis on Gray Davis?
Hello?
It's one of those only in California stories. The state's unpopular governor, Gray Davis, beset by an ailing economy and a $38 billion budget deficit, faces possible recall. And rumored as a possible replacement for Davis, movie star Arnold Schwarzenegger.
The Terminator? We'll see whether he's back or not.
Gray Davis has terminated opportunities, and now it's time we terminate Gray Davis.
Could I predict a phony energy crisis as a result of deregulation? Yes. Could I predict that Arnold Schwarzenegger would be our governor as a result of deregulation? Never would have come up with that. That's like a bad science fiction movie.
Apparently we have all been wrong. It is pronounced California. Ladies and gentlemen, the governor of the great state of California.